moderating the afternoon session. My name is Kelly Boutilier, and I am the Adult Learning Specialist working for CEDEC. I am here today to talk to you about a really cool project that I've been working on for the last year. Come on in, come on, you know you want to. Come on, get in here, come on. Are you sure you can't? You can't or you won't?
I can't.
Sylvia, we have your
No,
seat
I
right
can't.
here. Yes,
Have a
you
good
can.
thing.
All right.
I would have come, but I can't. I'm going to say yes.
Okay, so this afternoon we're going to do something different, okay? I'm not going to sit and talk to you the whole time. We're going to have an experiential activity at some point. You have the choice to say no thank you, but I highly encourage you to participate. If you notice me yelling at people saying come in, don't worry, that's just me trying to get more people to come in. Come in! So, integrated skills training for Indigenous and minority English speakers in Quebec. All right, let's at this point in the project. There we go. We've already done the land acknowledgement in the bigger group, but I really think it's important to do it again, and that's because the pilot project that I've been working on for the last year and a bit has been working with 2 Indigenous groups, and they have been amazing. They've been amazing, amazing partners. They've taught me so much, and I'm just so grateful for them. So for me, it's important that we do a bit of acknowledgement towards reconciliation practices. So, okay, plan for today. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the project, where it came from and what its purpose was and is. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the RESDAC model of integrated education and how it was used, and a little bit about the communities that I've been working with. Then, we're going to watch a short documentary film that we produced on one of the 2 communities. We'll do an experiential activity. If you're not comfortable with it, you have the right to refuse, but I encourage you to do so because it's going to be fun, okay? We're going to take a look at a strategic partnership framework. We're going to take a little break. I think that's really important. Then, putting it all together, the plan for the project versus reality, group discussions, synthesis, and wrap up and lessons learned. Does everybody have their phones turned on silent? Did you remember? Did everyone remember? Okay. So, a little bit about the project and where it's come from. So, the Co-op Vocational Skills Training project initially was a project completely about something else. They were looking at training Indigenous folks to become pilots in Northern Quebec. Due to a lot of changes, the program had to be reoriented, and now we are focusing on customer service training to address the need of labor in the tourism sector. Big change, but it's an important change. The picture that you're seeing here is of a group of folks in Gabowick First Nation. This is an Indigenous community in northwestern Quebec. It's about, to give you some context, an hour and a half northeast of North Bay. Okay? So in the picture here, you'll see Glenda on your left. She's our amazing community representative who's really been the rock that's made this happen. You'll see one of our employer partners, Danny Garot, who is from CEPAC, and Park Opemacan. So the background to this is that, CEPAC wanted to open up a national park, Parc National Opemacan, and it was going to be on traditional Algonquin territory. So the response of the community, the First Nations community there, a bit mixed, okay? Some people were happy that, it was going to be an opportunity for jobs. Some people, not so sure, okay? There's outsiders again coming in on our land. So it was an opportunity, though, to build a strategic partnership and work so that folks in this community would be able to go and work in the park. A little bit about the community, about 800 folks live there. The nearest employer is a wood processing plant. Was that someone here? Okay. In the village of Temiskaming. Okay. So not a lot of economic opportunities, not a lot of educational attainment, a lot of barriers, okay, to start with. Hi, welcome. Come on in. Okay, so next. Oh, we're not there yet. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the RESDAC model of integrated education. So back in the early 2000s, there was a community in Hawkesbury of Francophone minority folks living in an English setting, okay? They were factory workers, and due to economic conditions, the factory closed down. So the factory workers who had, in some cases 20 years of experience were trying to get rehired, re-enter the labor market, but they were facing numerous barriers. Some of them did not have their high school leaving certificate. Some of them did not have great literacy levels. Some of them did not have great language skills. And so when they went to try to access new jobs at other factories, they kept being confronted with these various barriers of, okay, well, we need a minimum of a high school degree. Okay, well, you can't do this unless you have your papers from technical college training. And all the way down, it was just barrier after barrier after barrier. So what happened was literacy groups, community groups, local employers came together to develop a customized training that would facilitate the re-entry into the labor market of these folks. And that is where the RESDAC model of integrated education comes from. We wanted to see if we could use this model in a Quebec context, in the customer service, specifically tourism industry, okay? And what I'm going to show you is a film that talks about how the project came together, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about the project. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, great. All right, so I think if I do this, and then I do this. Where's my mouse? There it is. Okay, so we are getting ready for the film. Do you need to do anything with the lights, or are we good? Good.
In April 2018, CEDEC and Quebec First Nation launched an integrated French language employment training pilot program to prepare adult students for jobs at Parc National d'Opemecan. This is a story of how CEDEC brings together partners to help communities harness economic opportunities and increase their resilience.
We really appreciate you guys welcoming us here on Algonquin territory today. It's my first time in Quebec. I'm just astounded by the beauty. Thanks so much for having us. I wanted to just acknowledge all the partners that have come together to try to bring you something that will be beneficial to you.
The main objective of the Co-op Vocational Pilot Program is to develop an integrated model of education that leverages community resources. What we do is we bring together various partners, employers, community leads, and other stakeholders that may be interested in becoming involved. And we do a needs analysis. We talk to everyone around the table and find out, okay, where are the gaps? So when we're designing the training, we're involving the employers from the get-go, and we're asking them questions like, what skills do your employees need in order to be job ready?
We got involved with the park because the park came in, and the park is sitting on Algonquin territory. In order for our band members to be able to apply for a job, that they needed French language first. We live in the province of Quebec, and we needed to ensure that our participants had enough French to go and apply for a job there. With it being on Algonquin territory, our hope is once this program is done, is that our people will be able to go and work there and be able to show off and be proud of their territory and give the stories for that territory.
Not too many birch trees.
No, not at all, no. Look at huge sequoia forest or something.
But it's going to be so cool.
Oh yes.
I'm really excited to welcoming you in the park today with so nice weather. Beautiful. So here you can see that we are in a working zone with all this equipment around. We are in the administration area. On your left side, we can't see from here because of the trees, but there's a lot of roads going in the forest around the trees. And it's the main campsite of the park. There will be around 60 places of camping. Most of them will be with water and electricity. We started by building that road to get access to the site. And after that, we worked on the campsite. And then we started to work on the welcoming visitor center that we're gonna see in a couple of minutes.
I think it's a huge thing that Pemmican has approached us right from the get-go, though. with this opportunity to learn French. It kind of brings us, it gives us the control back. It gives us a voice, right?
If they see somebody out there, like me, like, you know, I'm always involved in the community, I'm always doing something, you know, and to me, I'm on the positive side of it. And for me, like, that was my ancestors' place.
Just being there and being out there and being seen doing it, I think it'll lead to a lot of great opportunities in the future.
À CEDEC, on est vraiment heureux du partenariat qu'on a développé avec la communauté de Québec concernant la francisation. On sait que les gens de la communauté de Québec sont très attachés au territoire et ils vont y demeurer pour très longtemps. Donc, investir dans des programmes de formation auprès de cette clientèle-là, c'est vraiment bénéfique pour nous. On sait que ça va apporter à long terme.
This approach is different from traditional educational programs in that we integrate the skills the students learn from the beginning. We're really fortunate in this project to have CEPAC as a partner as well, in that they have been very active in discussing with us what their needs are for the students that will come and work with them. This is allowing us to create a very contextualized training, and the students who complete this training will be job ready when they are finished.
Part of the program is job training, job readiness, to have them ready to apply for positions in the park. I want this program to work for my people, not have my people work for the program.
I don't know if you know that, but we did a lot of archaeological work on the territory and in the surrounding of Pimicans Point. And we can establish now that there's 6,500 years of occupation on the territory by Algonquin people and people before them related to Algonquin people. So it should be special to be a part of another transformation or vocation for the site. From here we get a nice view and good perspective on the site.
Yeah.
I think this program will be a success and is a success because of the participants I have, my students I have 8 of them. They are enthusiastic, they're energetic, and they want to show off their territory. And you know what? This program success could be another community success.
Easier to see it when it's brought to life a little bit to understand what I'm talking about here. So that film took place in, I want to say it was March. It was March. And what was really exciting was we started out with 8 students. They were different ages, different backgrounds, different needs, everybody with this interest of working in the park. So you saw that Glenda mentioned that language skills were a big part of the needs. So the folks of Quebec, they are English speakers in a primarily French environment. Some of them still speak their native language, but not a lot of them. Do you want to come and sit? No, okay. And so French is a major barrier for them, okay? But we've got other things that we had to address, okay? Some of them had high school diplomas, some of them did not. Some of them had actually gone to college, some of them had not. One of the major strategic goals that we had was to figure out not just how to give them a training, but how to give them a training that would make them work ready for the context of Opanakan Park. Okay, so we have a wonderful opportunity here in that we have Indigenous people, local people who live on the land, and a park that's right there. So they can bring their culture to those jobs, okay? But we also know that there's some cultural differences there. So we had to look at what were the language skills they needed, number one. Number two, we needed to look at soft skills training. Okay, so has anybody here worked with Indigenous folks? Yeah, some. Okay, so you'll know that sometimes there's some differences between how things are run on reserves and outside of reserves. Sometimes time management can be an aspect, sometimes accountability can be an aspect, that it's just a bit different, okay? So these were things that we needed to address to make sure folks were successful. And then finally, technical skills. So at the park, there were a number of different positions that were available for people to take. There is accueil, so welcoming. There were maintenance folks. There were park rangers. I believe there was one other position that was something in between maintenance. It wasn't exactly maintenance, but it was around with maintenance. And so what we did is we worked with the employers, so Danny Garreau, who was filmed there with CEDEC, to figure out, okay, how can we place the students in these different opportunities, these different positions, get them to have a feel for it, get them to experience what it's like to be working in the park, and move forward. So what happened between this film and now was that the students started with French language training, and then in July they did June, they did a 1-week orientation session. So what's kind of interesting about the park is they are planning on doubling their staff size. So they started this year with 8 new employees. It was really ambitious and a little bit crazy what we all put together here. New park, new staff. There was a lot of challenges that they had to overcome, such as forest fires, and all of the logistical stuff of opening a new center. But what the folks did is they brought the students in. They had paired them up with the new employees. Those new employees acted as mentors to help reinforce the use of the French language. And they did a week orientation of what the park was all about, what it was going to be like. So they developed a relationship from the get-go with those mentors, or would-be mentors. After that week orientation, the students went back into their French language training until the month of July. In July, they started doing work placement, and they pretty much started full-time right away. And again, logistically, it was very complicated. There were a lot of things we had to work out. We had to work out transportation. Transportation was a big deal. Some of them didn't have driver's license. Some of them didn't have a car or access to a car. Some of them had children, and they had to work weekends, but they only had their kids every second weekend. There was like so many different logistical things, and we had to work really, really hard between the community lead Glenda, the employer, the students, the instructors, everybody to bring it all together to make it work. But it did. And I'm happy to say that out of the 8 who started, 5 are still in the training right now, which is really great. It's due to wrap up at the end of next month. So they've started their language training, they've done their work placement, they're finishing up on their language training, and then they hopefully will be recommended to be hired by the park next year, where the park will be doubling its employees. So it went from 8 this year, it'll be going to 16, and we're hoping that those 5 people will have gained enough skills, enough experience, enough of a relationship with the folks at the park that they're going to be hired. Anybody have any questions so far? Yeah.
Where did they do the language skills? Was it through the school board, or was it, did you bring people in specifically for that?
No and yes. So
what?
No and yes.
Oh.
We worked with the First Nations Adult Education School Council.
Okay.
And they provided instructors that would come in on a weekly basis. So the language training started with 2 instructors. And I'm not exactly sure if they split the week. I think that's how they did it. So the one instructor would be there Monday, Tuesday, the other one would be there Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then they swap.
Okay.
And then when they were doing their work placements, one instructor would come once a week to do check-ins. And so that would be a chance that they would have to check in with the student, check in with the employer, figure out where the language needs were going so that they would be able to reinforce.
Just a follow-up question,
Yeah.
were they, the students that were involved in that, or the people that participated,
Yeah.
were they given a salary or some sort of
Yes.
remuneration,
Yes,
something
they were
to assist them?
subsidized. They were subsidized.
Okay.
Yeah. So one of the special things about this is because we were working with a First Nations entity,
Mhm.
they have resource development funding.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know why that was coming out French first.
Yeah.
So they had a pocket of money that they could rely on for that.
Okay.
In addition to, there were in-kind contributions by the different partners. that got involved. So for example, they requested for, I think it was Quebec, to provide them with work boots, for instance. So there was a couple of them that needed steel-toe work boots.
Yeah.
And then the employer partner, they were looking after, you know, the cost of training, you know, the training. So like it was really like a lot of work put together by a lot of different partners to make it happen. Yeah. Was there another question? Yeah.
Well, it's really related to Mr. Murray's question.
Yeah.
The language learning, usually, like if it's integrated in the model that you explained, when sometimes the terms are not the terms that you use at work, sometimes a little disconnect between their learning and also their work.
Yeah.
So is it integrated and somehow, or is it a completely separate learning, language learning?
I'm going to get into it in more detail later, but yes and no. So the intention was for the language to be contextualized. That was the idea, and that was why at the beginning we started with the training entity, the employer, and the community lead all in place to have these discussions. Like I said, this program, this model, it's new. So we were trying to figure out, can we make something that really addresses the needs of the park? And that was an issue that came up. I will get into it in more detail after, but one of the things, for example, was the first language instructor they hired insisted that the folks do the pronunciation and the vocabulary from an international French perspective.
Oh.
They found themselves in the job site with their mentors suddenly going, and that was actually flagged. Yeah, that was flagged during that week orientation session, right? So we were able to go back and say, yeah, you might go work on that. Okay, right, great. Anybody else? Any questions? No? Good. Okay, we're gonna keep going. Okay, so. Okay, challenge activity. Okay, so we're gonna do an activity here. We are in, can everybody put themselves in one of the 4 tables? We're going to try to be as evenly numbered as possible. I'm going to give you instructions per table. We are going to need 2 people that will need to be okay with being blindfolded. Work it out in your group, okay? If you're not comfortable with it, you have the right to refuse, okay? We don't want anybody to freak out. No one's going to do anything weird. Trust me, I want you to want it, okay? But if you can put yourselves around one of the 4 tables and we can get ourselves sort of evenly distributed, that would be fantastic. What's that experience for everybody? Fun. Fun? Okay. Productive. Productive? Any other words, comments? Artistic, relaxing?
Yeah.
Challenging.
Cooperative, confirming.
Confirming, okay.
And confused.
Confusing. How was it to be the one blindfolded person in the room?
I didn't mind. It was fun.
How was it to have everybody kind of telling you what to do?
I had great instructions and encouraging words also inserted in the instructions. So
Okay. And what is your final puzzle?
They're not sure.
It is a dinosaur, yes. Okay, so back table. I'm really interested to know. Back table, I played a trick on you guys. I played a trick on you guys.
We discovered the sheep was spurious, yes.
This sheep is just a stowaway, and I held the last piece of your puzzle.
But they got it still.
They got it, they're just missing one piece. What was it like when you were trying to put together that snail and not having any clue what it was? At the beginning they had kind of a snake going on.
We did. Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, what was it like? It was, I think it was fun to like exchange ideas and what's possible, and Charles kept reminding us we had to think out of the box. Get out of the box.
Did anybody in your team get frustrated at any point? No?
Well, it feels like it should work very linearly because everything is like color-coded and numbered, but then we were out of a conversation on a portion, so like you're not able to make that final action, right?
Right. And so, for example, this puzzle that we've got by this team over here, it's your traditional square, right? You 2 groups, you didn't get square. You got these weird shapes. You didn't know what you were building. They're not in the traditional confines. You can't say, okay, quick, go find the corner pieces, right?
It's on the side.
Okay. So, this group over here, what was it like and how did you decide on your process of coloring? I want to know. Beautiful. Coloring. You put it together really quickly. I saw that.
discussion.
Yeah.
Just was reminded that it's red and blue equal purple.
Oh,
So I don't think it's come out as good as I thought it was going to come
Oh,
out.
I
It
see.
kind of just takes away any,
You took,
yellow.
It's the sunset.
We're in between being precious and just going with our
but what's
conditions
interesting,
and conformity.
what's interesting is though, you had the restriction of only 4 colors, but you made a 5th one.
A
Sixth one,
And
too.
a 6th one too,
Yes,
okay.
and
And
the
your,
seventh
these
one.
are, and your.
7th, great. So you took your resources, you combined them, and you came up with something new to add to your project.
Still not happy with the purple
Interesting.
though. I'll get over it.
Just let it go.
Yeah.
Let it go.
Okay. I know, John, I didn't respect the template for branding, but I had to put in this slide here. Why do you think we were just putting together puzzles? What does this maybe have to do with what I've been talking about so far? Problem solving, yeah.
Coordination and assumptions.
Yes, yes, yes. Coordinations, assumptions, cooperation, yes. Communication, yes.
And learning things that you're not sure what the for and against.
Yes. Or not knowing what it's going to look like at the end. You have every intention of building, but you don't quite know what it's going to look like.
And there are some kind of rules that people
Yes.
bring to the group,
Yes.
but then those can be changed,
Right.
adjusted.
Or there may be confines that you can't go out of. I told you you had to build it within the square, right? If you hadn't put it in there, I would have said, no, put it in there, right? Right. And can you mix, let's say, black and yellow to get something nice? Not really, right? It's, you could mix it, but it's not, it's a condition, it's a constraint, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually ask for some brave souls to do our very last puzzle putting together. There's one last one. We can do it all as a big group, or you can support the group and we can have, say, 4. We'll do that back table there. And yeah, who's feeling brave? Go sit at that table. But we're all going to help, but some of us are going to be more active.
Volunteers.
Okay, thank you.
That's our suggestion.
You're using your best practices.
All right, come on, we need some more. Come on, some men. Give me some men, please. Come on, men, folks. Come on. Come on. Oh, look at you.
Right.
Come on. Come on, equal opportunities there. John, one more. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen. Now, you might want to get up and come.
Yeah,
because it's
it's
going to be
neat.
interesting. Okay, so
The guinea pigs.
the conditions for this puzzle that you must put together is one person is blindfolded, but, sorry, there's stickers on there, but can also not speak. So, who is going to be the blindfolded person who has to put the pieces together who can also not speak? Please choose.
You roughed it last time.
Alrighty.
I was gonna say, I usually talk too much anyway, so it's a good rule for me.
The rest of your team is going to support you to assemble this puzzle. I didn't take away any pieces this time, I promise.
It's not a dinosaur.
I don't remember what it is. So, your lady who has a blindfold is the only person who may manipulate the pieces, but, sorry, your lady, but Anna may not speak. So, help Anna to assemble the puzzle, please.
There are 7 pieces in the number. Okay? You're touching number.
Touch one at a time.
That's number 6, it's blue. To the left of that, there's a number 4. You're holding number 2 right now, and that's number 3. That's number 5. And that's number 1. And that's number 7.
Number 4 is way
Oh,
over there.
yep,
Just
that's
touch
number 4 that you're touching. 2, 3, 4. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so number 2 has like 2 different sort of hole inserts for number 1. I'm assuming they're gonna connect to number 3, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so
The right track. To your left. Keep going. Follow. See if
yeah,
you're
and see
there.
how there's a hole there. So if you try and like
Lift it
bring
up,
one
lift
up,
it up.
put it in.
Or like,
You do it that way if you want.
So if you turn your left hand clockwise 90
It's the 45.
And do you feel with yourself there's a hole?
Can you lift that up?
Yeah, and slide it in.
Okay,
Okay.
yes. So we got 1 and 2 connected. Now you've got 3. So that's 1 and 2 together. Times 3.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Find it right. Lift it up. To clockwise. Move it. Up.
Yeah.
Up, yeah. Turn it. 5 minutes clockwise.
It's like 2 days.
Yeah, maybe there's different ones you have to try. Yeah,
Oh.
that one you go. Lift it up. To your.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
You can't touch the pieces, but the ones that you can't touch can.
Oh, that's true.
That's out. Leg 4.
So there's no more like holes in the food. Oh,
There is just 1 and number 3.
So
So
there's
it's 1.
Yeah.
2,
1,
3.
2, 3.
So you feel the hole at the bottom of 3.
There it is, yeah.
And you feel that 4. Clockwise 15 minutes.
Yeah, just slightly to your left with what's in your right hand. Yeah, right there.
You got it. You got it.
Here's
What a trooper, Anna, you're doing great.
Yeah.
Oh.
You don't need that.
There you go.
All right, number 5. Coming up.
Okay.
We've got 3 sides to this and going to 1 place in number 4. So as you can feel your right thumb, just yes, you should be able to feel. Sorry, your left thumb. Feel the hole.
Anybody have any thoughts yet as to what this puzzle might be?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
That's 6.
Okay, so there's
Barely just 1.
hole. And there are 2 sprockets on number 5, so.
You have to turn it around.
Yes.
Lift it up.
So somebody said they thought they knew what this is shaping up to be. I want to hear, what do you think it's supposed to be? Anybody have any ideas?
No.
No.
That's a corner, so keep going, keep finding your way. That's really a corner of the piece of
So just rotate your right hand a little bit. Okay, there
Yeah.
you go. And up.
Okay.
Number 7 over there.
So it's supposed to be just
So
on
that
the
way.
spot. Yeah.
The straight side should be facing straight ahead. That's 6, but number 7, no. That's right. Yeah. So she went.
Sweet. That's great.
Almost there?
Yes.
Get that in? I think we have it.
We have it.
Oh!
Thanks for moving your blindfold.
So
So what
I
is
don't know what
this?
it is, but
It's
it's
no clue.
Loch Ness Monster.
This.
But I'm not sure, it doesn't.
It's very close.
Yeah, I don't think it's
very
it
close.
fits.
It's very close, what you had going on here. Huh? Mhm. I'm starting to see a theme here. A giraffe or a dinosaur or something. Reptile.
There's the
I did
tail.
that before we started. So.
Oh, God.
You're
I did that one, so that
There's
was
the tail.
perception.
Species of dinosaurs.
The 5 just
There.
Oh,
Okay, folks, get yourselves comfortable. And our next
That was a very good job, team.
T-Rex.
I put it back on and I'll back you up.
Okay, so, Adam, what was it like to be
Next up is
blindfolded
lunch.
and not allowed to speak? What was that like?
It was good. It was fine.
You're okay? And how did you feel when David started like taking your hands and then no problem? Okay,
I
all
was
right.
waiting for that, but I couldn't ask.
Now, I'm going to explain to you why we were doing that. One, because it's fun. It's fun to watch you struggle just a little bit. I'm sorry. I really believe that experiential education is a really important way to help us have conversations, okay? And what we're about to get into is a little bit technical, and so we're going to relate it, okay? So, the pyramid that I'm about to show you right now, I just want to let you know, if you're taking images or whatever, please don't share it publicly because we haven't officially published this yet. So for your information, but it's really new, you're getting a sneak peek preview, okay? The inverted pyramid of strategic partnerships is something I wanted to share with you because it's a framework for understanding challenges when we come together to create programs, partnerships, content, whatever, okay? And each one of the puzzle activities that you just did represents one of these levels, okay? So I'm going to actually hand out handouts so that you can take a look at this and okay.
What each of those hours represents.
Okay, so,
Alright, here, oh, we have, one more of these ones. Oh, thank you. We just need three more.
oh yeah, if you just okay. So the puzzles that we just did, each one of your teams represents one of the philosophical, political, administrative, or didactical, pedagogical issues that can occur when we are trying to develop an integrated training program. Let me break it down, okay? So, we were very fortunate in our position that we were able to work with a researcher to actually pull out the different elements of an integrated education program to figure out what is going to help it be successful and what might hinder the success. And one of the parts of that report, which is quite a long report that I've just pulled out, is this pyramid, okay? So, in a very short and brief explanation, and I'll relate it back, first thing that we have to deal with is our philosophical issues. So the pyramid goes from the bottom to the top in order of how much time we need to spend and how we can progress to the next level, okay? It's not necessarily going to only just go up. Sometimes you'll go up and you'll come back down. But each of these levels is something that you're likely to come across. So in our example of our program that we created in Quebec, the very first question we have to ask is a philosophical issue. Are all partners around the table in agreement about designing an integrated model of education? Is everybody okay with the idea? That's the very first thing. And I'm sure in experiments and programs and projects that you've had, you've come across this with the stakeholders that you've been with. Is everybody on board? That's the very first thing that you have to ask, because if you can't move beyond that, you can't move to the next level, okay? Which of the puzzles do you think represented, which group represented the philosophical issues? No. No? It was not the painting. Okay.
Probably ours.
Nope.
Because you philosophically thought you had to use all of the people.
It was this first group with the one person blindfolded. And the blindfold is to represent that sometimes you've got a group of stakeholders and those people aren't willing or able to see that they somehow are not on board with it. Okay? So either they're not willing to see that they can step outside of the normal paradigm, or they're unable to see that they can't move into something different. Okay? Political issues. Which grouping do you think represented the political issues?
Maybe like painting.
Nope.
Then it's us.
Nope.
The last one.
It was the last one, okay? So political issues is all about power dynamics, okay? Who had the power in that group?
No.
Three speakers.
Everybody who could speak. The person who couldn't speak, who couldn't see and was having themselves manipulated.
But that assumes that the person who's putting the puzzle together will listen to the people who are speaking.
Well, that is also an issue too. There are many levels of political, okay? And this is another thing that's important to reflect on, is that there are micro-political, so it could be within your team, you know, within the stakeholders you're working with, but there's macro. So what are the policies that might be in place that are making it difficult for you to launch what you want to launch? Did anybody attend Michael Canuel's discussion yesterday? Okay, so David, you were with me. So Michael is with Learn Quebec, and he is working on this concept called New Schools. Next Schools. And really what they are coming up against is like a real political like butting of heads, because what they're envisioning is very different from the established norm, the established policies, right? So that's what we're talking about. Administrative issues. Who do you think was on administrative issues? So was either this group or this group?
Yeah.
I can't remember what they were.
I would say that group because they were missing a piece.
Yes. Yes.
We
So
were
one-
playing with a full deck.
No, but it's so basically, if you work through your philosophical issues and you work through your political issues, you're in a pretty good way. The next bit when you're trying to build something is what? Figuring out who's going to pay for what, who's going to offer what part of the program, figuring out what parts are missing, right? So you folks thought, you're like, oh, we're done. It's a snail, we're done. But then you realize, oh, actually, we're missing a part. And then you had an extra part that you didn't even need. And that's going to happen. Sometimes we're going to be trying to build something and someone's going to bring something to the table. Maybe it's an idea. Maybe it's a deviation from the plan. That is a sheep. You don't need that sheep, but it's still there. Somebody around that table might have that missing piece and be holding it close to their chest because really they're not fully on board. Or politically, it makes more sense for them to hold back until they know you've got enough skin in the game. Okay? Didactical and pedagogical issues. This, when we're talking about an integrated program, is really the final stages. You've got all of the framework in place, you've figured out all of that stuff. It's the final pieces. Ideally, you've got all the right people, you've got all the right tools, you've got all the right materials, you just need to put on the final touches. You'll have to decide amongst you how maybe is it going to be colored, right? Who's going to do the coloring? What are we going to color first? What colors don't go in this mix? What colors are missing that we're going to make, right? This is what we're talking about. Okay? Anybody have any questions at this point in time? No? Good? All right, good, because it's a perfect time for a little break. So, welcome back. Thanks for coming back. Thank you for participating in our puzzle activity and for staying strong with me so far. The next thing we're going to do is I want to tell you a little bit about the ideal and then the reality. Okay? Because every time we do a project, there is the ideal, there's what we set out to do, and then there's all the things that happen in the middle that make it not quite work out the way we hoped. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what this is for, okay? And this will help you with the next activity. So this is a document, really, it's just for your reference. It digs in a little bit more about the inverted pyramid, but not too much because I didn't want to fry your brains, okay? We're going from bottom to top. I know it's a little strange. I just wanted to maintain the inversion of the pyramid. So when we're looking at each level, we're looking at the types of issues that we want to be working out, okay? So for example, if you look at the bottom of your handout here where it says first level of the inverted pyramid, two things you want to have happen is community partners are willing to explore and understand the organizational culture and vision of each partner to see whether or not values and educational beliefs are compatible enough to develop an integrated program together. That has to happen. If it doesn't happen, you're not going to move forward. Another one is community partners are willing to focus on the demand rather than the existing offer. So what this is referring to is there are tons and tons of educational programs out there, But if the target group that you want to work with are not served by the existing training that's available, you have to be willing to then develop something new. Okay, that's the whole thing that we're about here. We've discussed it so many times. If we're working with students, students need to come first. And this can be very challenging sometimes for training institutions because they can be seen as the experts in their field. And so it's very challenging if someone comes and says, what you've got is great, but it doesn't solve our problem. Okay, it can be very confronting, and that can be challenging, okay? I'm not gonna read through all these. I'm gonna let you do that. I just wanna show you how it works. So you've got all the levels here and the things that are needed. If you turn the page, this is more of a reference guide for you later. These are questions that you can be asking, okay? So the next 2 pages there. And then the last page is something that we're going to use at the very end, okay? This is just for the last activity, okay? Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is I want to tell you a little bit about some of the things that we encountered, okay? The pilot project, we started with 2 different groups, okay? One was in the northwest, Boutilier. The other one is in QUESCREN, which is in the Gaspésie, okay? One group is Algonquin, the other group is Mi'kmaq. One group was focusing specifically on working in a national park. The other one is focusing more on capacity building for tourism offerings in the community. Very different sets of standard. One group, we set about with the intention to focus on French and then move forward. The next group was a blended approach right from the beginning, much more integrated. One group hasn't started yet. The other group is almost finished. Okay? Lots of different little things that have happened in here. So, I'm going to hand out 2 baggies that have different issues that have come up with the training groups. Some of them are things that worked well, some of them are things that didn't. And what we're going to do is we're going to see by group if we can figure out which level they belong to. Okay? I'm going to read them out first, and then you can have a discussion around what's happening. Is that okay? Is everybody following me so far? Anything that I need to explain better? No? Okay, so this is just, like I said, a sample of some of the things that have happened. Many, many more things have happened. Some things great, some things frustrating, some things, you deal with. Okay? So, one such example. After promising to come forward with curriculum documents to the steering committee, the training partner does not follow through. The steering committee tries to decide who will pay for an additional instructor to cover mental health training. They wanted it built in. Stakeholders discuss how many hours should be dedicated to French language training and how many hours should be dedicated to Mi'kmaq language training. The employer partner offers feedback on students' progress in soft skills development using an agreed upon computer program. An instructor is not sharing information about student absences with the community lead in a timely manner. The steering committee is finding it challenging to secure funding to subsidize student work placements. A student complains that the language training she is receiving is not teaching her vocabulary connected to the workplace. The employer partner expresses frustration that a student on placement does not appear to be motivated. And finally, the start date of the program is delayed because 4 students on the list are not returning messages. So what I'd like you to do is, as a group, you'll see some of it, there's a yellow line. It's because we're being printed 2-sided by accident, so the part that's got a yellow stripe through it, that's not the side you want. I want you to discuss in your group at your table where you think these issues or things that are working might fit along the pyramid. So we're going to do this. I'm curious to see where you go by table, okay? So we'll go through the list, and you can let me know where you think it fell. Okay? We're gonna back up here.
Yeah.
Oh.
Wrong way. Oops, there we go. Okay. So the first example, after promising to forward the curriculum documents, back table, where did you say this fell?
Mostly political and a tiny bit administrative.
Okay. Front table? Administrative, so after promising, the first examples, after promising forward curriculum documents, where did you say that it fell?
We put administrative.
Administrative. Okay, so what happened is the training partner that we wanted to work with from the very beginning said, yes, 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 we're very willing to adapt and we believe in this process and we can do this. It was philosophical, completely philosophical. They were telling us one thing, but, well, no, because they didn't believe in it, right? Political comes into some other stuff that happened, but they didn't actually believe in an integrated approach. They wanted to maintain control. And so the political thing comes later, but this was really, yeah. Okay, steering committee trying to decide who's going to pay for the additional instructor. Back table. We say.
Oh, this one, administrative?
Okay, front table?
We said the same.
That's right. So they had agreed, everyone had agreed. This is in the group that hasn't started yet. They said, yes, wonderful, mental health training, let's build it in. I said, yes, okay, let's do it. Who's going to pay for it? They're still trying to figure it out. Okay. So, and basically what's happening is the training provider, they have funds for the folks that they've already hired that they use for all of the programming, but the community has somebody in-house that they want to hire. How do we fund them? They don't know yet. Hopefully we'll find out tomorrow. Okay. Stakeholders discuss how many hours should be dedicated to French language and how many should be dedicated to Mi'kmaq language. Back table, what did you say?
Well, because we had different scenarios, so it could fit in many. It could be philosophical because someone can say, we're not going to learn French unless we learn our own language, and so it could have been that. And then we also said didactic because, so it kind of fit, depending on how we describe the situation, it fit under a different.
Great. Front table, what did you say?
We put it in political.
Okay, so Valerie had a really great point earlier. She said, we don't know what the context is, so we were kind of guessing. In this case, the context is that everyone around the table agreed, yes, we're going to have French language training and we're going to have Mi'kmaq because we want to make sure that we maintain our culture and we're working in the customer service industry and tourism, right? So in this case, it is the didactical pedagogy. Okay. All right, the employer partner offers feedback on the student's progress in soft skills development using an agreed upon computer program. What did the back table say? Where does this follow?
This one. Oh, administrative.
Okay. Front table, what did you say?
We put it in pedagogical.
Okay, so the front table's got it on this one, and that's the case that we're not trying to figure out who's going to be administrating the soft skills training or who's paying for it or whatever, but just the fact that we've agreed this is the tool that we're going to use and we're using it. Okay. All right.
How do you miss that one?
That's okay, and that's the thing. Sometimes it's messy and you're not really sure. Don't worry about it. That's the whole point, is to stimulate discussion. This is meant to be. How did I get on this? There we go. This is meant to be a tool to help you analyze when you get stuck. So, and this is the whole point, is that I want you to be able to look at this when you go off tomorrow, the next day, whatever, when you're working through projects, when you're working through problems, and go, I think this is where we're getting stuck. And then you have a way of getting in and starting a conversation. Okay. An instructor is not sharing information about student absences with the community lead in a timely manner. What is happening here? Back table, what do we think?
We didn't.
Because
There too we had different scenarios.
Okay.
I thought it was philosophical.
Okay.
And
why?
Because I thought it was the person knew that, the student was single mom and ratting out on her would have negative implications philosophically.
Okay.
It was like protect.
Yep.
But then there were a number of other scenarios that were presented that were equally logical.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's the thing, you've got to work with it, right?
So
What else?
there was an administrative one in the sense that it might be part of the contractual obligations of the instructor, and a didactic one in the sense that it might have an impact on the learning of the students.
Okay, all right, great. Front table?
We put it in administrative.
Okay. In this one, it was a political group. The instructor just didn't want to do it. There was lots of things that the instructor didn't want to do. And it causes a lot of problems. And so what you were saying there, Denise, is really interesting, right? Because it's true. The funding for folks is connected to their presence, their attendance, right? So if they don't show up, they shouldn't get paid. Now this is why it's a problem. If the community lead says, I need the attendance reports, you need to give them to me on Friday, and the instructor's like, nah, not gonna. What happens? Well, the person gets paid and they shouldn't, and then it's a headache for the community lead, because they have to either claw the funds back or get into arguments with the person. Oh God, it's messy. Anyway, that happened. That's a thing that happened.
Sorry, why is it political?
So in this case, partners are willing to establish common operational procedures by consensus and in a transparent manner. We had the discussion in advance. This is what's going to happen. The instructor is going to make sure that they provide the absence and attendance, whatever, and then they didn't.
So you're considering the instructor as a partner?
Well, they're effectively under the training partner, right? So they should be singing and dancing the same tune as whatever the training partner says, right? So if the training partners agree that they're going to deliver X at such a time, and the instructor should be in alignment with that. Yeah. But like you said, contextually, it could fall in different categories. But in this context, with what we went through, that's what happened. Okay, the steering committee is finding it challenging to secure funding to subsidize student work placements. Let's mix it up and go to the front table first.
Oh no, I didn't find it yet.
Okay.
Is this one?
Yeah.
Okay, administrative.
Okay.
No, is that it? Oh, sorry. Okay, then political.
Okay. Why do you say political?
I'm not sure why we said political. No, this is what
Depends on
happening.
the situation, I think that's what you said.
Yeah.
Like if it's funding, if you're trying to find funding, but it's people don't believe in the project, then you're not gonna find funding. So in that context, it might be political, but
Okay.
it could be also administrative.
Okay.
Or
Okay. Thank you. Back table, what did you say?
We said political.
We had different scenarios too, but political.
I think we settled on political because it was a gap. There was something missing.
So
Piece missing.
effectively, you're both right, and it does fall into both categories for this. The reason why is politically, from a macro perspective, not a micro, it's challenging to find funding for training when you want to add hours to do an integrated approach. So the school boards can access funding if they want to deliver an AEP in customer service. Easy peasy, it's recognized by the ministry, no problem. But suddenly, if you now need to find hours because you want to add in a work placement and you want to add in language training, where do we find the funding? It's different depending on who you're working with. So, for example, like I said earlier, the First Nations communities, it's a bit of a different context because they have different resources available to them. And we managed to find solutions fairly, I'm not going to say easily, but with more ease. We are looking at this model in other contexts about Quebec, and one of the biggest challenges we're facing is, where do we find the money to do this? And we keep looking around and we're getting the same answers. Well, we don't really do that. So yeah, from a macro perspective, from an admin perspective, it's an issue too, right? Because if internally you can't kind of figure out who's going to kick in what funds for what, it could be a question of in-kind contribution. It could be a question of, one of your stakeholders is not willing to give their time to supervise a student, right? Okay, great, 3 left. Okay, a student complains that the language training she is receiving is not teaching her the vocabulary connected to the workplace. Front table, what did you say?
We put it in pedagogical.
Okay, back table?
Same.
Yeah.
You're wrong. just in this context, okay? So basically what happened, again, we had conversations with the training partners saying it's very, very important with this approach that everything is integrated. We want to make sure that the language training is contextualized. It has to link in with the work partner. The employer partner needs to be talking to you and we need to get this. Yes, you're assured. No problem, it'll work. You never have the conversations. The language training never got properly contextualized. So in this case, it's actually philosophical because once again, the training institution believed that the way they did it was the right way to do it. So they weren't listening to a thing that we had to say. Okay, the employer partner expresses frustration that a student on placement does not appear to be motivated. Back table, what did you say?
I think we said between those two.
Where is it?
It's right here.
Between
Didactic and philosophical.
Okay. And why didactical? I was curious.
It's a soft skill. It was a soft
Teacher's
skill that the
responsibility
teacher,
to
yeah.
motivate, but
Or to develop a soft skill that looks like motivation.
Okay. Okay.
But
Great.
philosophical was very simply that what looked like motivation to someone may not look like motivation to someone else, right?
Okay.
If someone turns up late, for example, doesn't
Okay.
mean they're not motivated.
Okay, great. Front table, what did you say?
We said the same.
Okay, so interesting, okay? You were on the right track there, okay? So effectively, again, working with the training partner, we said we need to integrate soft skill training. This is part of the course that we need. We need to know that for an employee to be work ready, they need to work on their soft skills. And part of that is explaining what do you need to expect, or what should you expect when you're going on work placement. They didn't cover these skills. So the students went on work placement, and I mentioned to you, we started with 8 and we finished with 5. One of those students didn't want to be there because she didn't know what it meant to have a job. So when she got there and she got into it, she wasn't interested. She wasn't prepared. She wasn't connected into it. So in this case, again, it was philosophical because the training institution believed that their way of doing it was the way that was going to respond to the needs, and it wasn't in this case. Okay, the last one. The start date of the program is delayed because 4 students on the list are not returning messages. Did that make sense to everybody? Because when I wrote it, I was like, I hope this is coming across correctly. Back table, what did you say?
You said administrative.
Okay. Front table?
We said the same.
Exactly. So the reason why it's administrative in this case is it's really silly. So the community passed the phone numbers on to the training institution. The training institution called, couldn't get an answer, and then it just stopped. Okay, well, what do? I actually had to go in and talk to the 2 separate people and say, well, can you not get the phone numbers back to the community so the people in the community can knock on the doors and say, where are you? Are you coming? Right? And it was just a matter of deciding who's responsible for this. Perfect. Great. Thank you. That was amazing. Okay. So. We're going to skip ahead here. Okay. So, going back here. Here's what I'd like to do for our home stretch. We've got, how many minutes left here? Okay, roughly 25 minutes. I just brought you through a real quick version of what we experienced in this pilot program, okay? And what I thought I would do is give you an opportunity right now in pairs to find someone that you haven't spoken to much so far during the conference and see if there's something that has been coming up that you're working on, an issue, and you're going to use your handout that I gave you on the back page. Back page. Not the very back page, sorry. The very back page is for notes. I forgot to tell you that. This part of the page, you're going to write down the challenge that you're facing, if you are facing one, or if you're not facing one now, it could be something that happened in the past. Some interesting ideas that you might have come across, and then see if you can figure out where they fell in the pyramid, okay? And then some possible next steps. So again, if this is something that right now you've got no examples, but it was in the past, maybe you can think about, okay, well, what could I have done differently to resolve it? Okay, and so we're gonna do that. I think, do we have even numbers? 2, 4, 6, 8. I think we almost have pairs, yeah. We'll do that, we'll have a discussion, and then we'll come back and we'll share. So, I think I want to reiterate that the reason why I got you to do this activity and how it connects back to what we were trying to achieve is that we set out at the beginning to do an integrated training model. The goal was to get people the skills they needed in alignment with what was available to the local labor market. Okay? Did we succeed in making a fully integrated approach? What do you think? Nope.
I think you're on the right path.
Right. We got certain elements in place, okay? We definitely, there's certain things like those students, they can definitely speak French better than they could 6 months ago, right? Did we develop relationships? Heck yeah. Those 5 students that are going to complete are in a way better position to get hired on the park than they would have been had they not gone through the training. But did the integrated program as it's meant to fully work? Did it work? No. And it didn't work for a number of reasons, okay? But primarily what we discovered were there are 2 big issues, okay? One is a philosophical difference with one of the partners that we worked with. Another was an administrative challenge. And it's like I discussed earlier, the fact that there's certain paradigms for training that exist, they're easy to work within, but once you try to step out and create something a little bit different, it gets tricky. It wasn't a question that most of the stakeholders weren't willing to, but it's the funding structures attached to it that made it really challenging. And moving forward, when we try to evolve this model and try it in different contexts, that's something that we're going to have to address. Did you find today useful? Yeah? Good, good. Did you find it engaging? Yes. Good. I hate afternoon sessions where people just talk at me. Yesterday, I was here. It was interesting, but I was exhausted. So in that context, I guess what I'm trying to say is the material that I've provided for you right now, this pyramid, while it's not published and available for the public yet, it will be. Okay, that's our intention to get it out. I want you to see it as a diagnostic tool. Okay? If you're coming up against difficulties, challenges, and I want to hear about some of them before we wrap up, think about this, how this tool might be able to help you come to a solution. Even if it's a question of just figuring out what's going wrong. Okay, I said to, sorry, what's your name? Yes?
Doug Brown from John Abbott.
I
Yes.
said to Doug, like, we spent a good few months going, what is going on? There were things that were going wrong, but we couldn't figure out what it was because we didn't have this kind of a tool to look at it and go, okay, clearly there's a philosophical issue here. That's the problem. And until we resolve that, we can't move up and address anything else. Yes, we can still deliver a program, but it's not going to achieve what we initially set out to achieve. Okay, so I would like to hear about, we are 3:24, we're due to wrap up at 3:30. I would like to hear about any crazy things that you've come up with that you would like to share. And then I think 3:30 is our networking break, right? If anybody wants to find me to ask more questions, you can, and if you don't, then just fly away and be free, okay? But does anybody have something that you guys have some really great conversations. Yes, Doug, go for it.
Well, I'm the Dean of Technology Programs at John Abbott, so we have 12 different programs. And the sorts of issues we run into with our partners vary by program. So I looked at this and I said, if you look at some of them, then, for instance, in information library technology, you cannot be a librarian even in an elementary English school or high school if your French isn't adequate. They expect it, so we have to make some arrangements when we place interns for those things. So what is being revealed to us is that we have to get those students, we have to get the French level up, or we have to make an administrative arrangement for it. In other cases, like our nurses, when they go into the clinicals at hospital, which they start doing quite early in the program, we're having some serious problems finding placements for these students because within the MUHC, McGill has a certain amount of clout, and they're claiming more and more of the spaces, and the SAGEPs are having difficulty placing students in clinical situations. So this is an administrative issue that is also a political issue, all right, because McGill has its own needs and they put their needs first. Then the last one I'll say, I could say this about all different sorts of programs, but with regard to police technology, one of the concerns we have is the students remaining in Quebec and visible minority and Anglophone minority students getting hired by police forces. And that runs through all of these things, including levels of French, especially written French, administration, the recruitment strategies on the part of the police forces, political issues, and of course philosophical issues. So I would say that this is a very useful thing for me when I think about the sorts of things we encounter. And by the way, some things work well, and you can also understand why they work well if you look at this and you understand, oh, I know why it's working well with this partner. It's because all the things are aligned and we're aligned with them in all of these categories.
So, Doug, I'm really glad you brought that up because one of the big strengths of this pilot project that we had was our relationship with the employer partner. The employer was bending over backwards. They were a circus contortionist. They were trying to make it work.
I'll give you an example of why employers can be motivated to do so. Computer science, they need coders. Yeah. They need students. Students have left our program at Prestige at an entry-level salary of $72,000. Those like CAE, fantastic partner.
Oh, yeah.
They are doing everything they can to recruit and to encourage. They're setting up a scholarship program. And I realize it's because boom, 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 we are in line in all of these things.
So I want to come back to you in a second. I just want to see, does anybody else have anything that they came up with that they want to share? you were scribbling furiously. Yes, David?
Well, we were at the same presentation yesterday, Michael Canuel,
Yeah.
and I think we were earlier in the day about a principal of a large elementary school in Gatineau, very close to Ottawa, maybe a kilometre away from Parliament buildings. And our schools just, enrollments doubled in the last 5-6 years, and our building's not big enough anymore. Luckiest principal in the world, we just got money for an investment of $5 million for an extension, and we got selected for one of the Lavical schools, which is anywhere from $2 to $5 million for School of the Future. And we take architecture, nature, nutrition, fitness movements into consideration. So say that's 10 million will be invested in the school, which for any school you're going, wow, that's really nice. But the reason why we were selected is because the selecting committee saw willingness within its staff to embrace change, to have a different mindset towards education in general. And Lavical really means you're using this as a research project. So it's not just about us as much as we think it's about us, it's about education. But then we hear the next schools and Michael Canuel and Noel Burke thinking of how to completely shift this thinking of education. Mm-hmm. And that the new ideas, when you're looking at philosophical, the administrative, the political, of how you change teachers' mindset from just getting a new building and with architecturally designed with light and nature, and how that's great, but think of shifting your teachers for teaching 10 years down the road. So just looking at that pyramid and seeing where's the philosophical battle ahead, where's the political battle with want a cultural room? Is it Cree? Is it Algonquin? We're on Algonquin unceded land. So you just can foresee the challenges ahead, and you go, yeah, that's philosophical. That's political.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Diagnostic tool. Yes.
There you
go. Good. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, Doug. So I want to go back to what you were saying. With some of the issues that you flagged, does this tool help you come up with any steps, like concrete action steps that you can take away, like a next thing that you're going to do once you leave the forum?
Well, it would, since we're trying to expand our partnerships, especially into regional internships, it would allow me to approach those things to make sure our regional partners are on the same wavelength as we are. In youth and adult correctional, we want to get more of our students hired, including into federal and provincial penitentiaries and things within Quebec, but also in, we have youth crisis centers, we have rape crisis centers, battered women, toxicomane, I'm getting addiction rehab centers. And in the Laurentians, we've been told in some of those French-speaking centers that they're not interested in hiring our graduates. And I'm not sure exactly what the issue is. So if we go banging on their doors, but they've already made up their mind that it's not the profile that our graduates have, then we would just be wasting our time. So we have to get to the root of what the resistance is and figure out if we can get on the same page. So it definitely does. And also we're trying to partner with other CEGEPs. We have certain priorities with regard to retention and regional retention. If those other CEGEPs are not as enthusiastic about that as we are, then what would be the point of really trying to develop a full partnership? So yes, I think this is useful for me.
So I want to say thank you, everyone, for spending the afternoon with me, for getting silly and putting on blindfolds and putting together puzzles and tearing the room apart and setting it back up together. I really, really appreciate it. I'm going to put my contact info up on the board here. Business card because I'm really well prepared, but you can find me on LinkedIn. So I'd love to talk to you some more. So unfortunately I'm not going to be here tomorrow, but I'm here. Thank you so much.